So yes, good morning everyone. I am CA.Jayakrishna. I'm here to take you through the GST syllabus. So me and you together we are trying to study CA final indirect taxation, which will be applicable for November 2026 attempt. So the material which I am presenting right now is prepared by me, and don't worry, I'll be uploading this document through a link in description or comments below. And so yeah, let's go and start the chapter 1, which is supply. So why supply? So why the chapter is important is, it is supply is the event to levy the GST right here. And I'm not saying here, you can see below charging section 9 of CGST Act. Here, section 9 of CGST Act here says that CGST is levied on intrastate supply of goods or service or both. GST is applicable for goods and service. For that, it should be supply. So, for example, I have a good. Just because I'm having the good, it's not a supply. I have to sell it. So the transaction is termed as supply. The supply should be there for GST to be levied. So in this chapter of supply, we mainly have only three sections: section 7.1, section 7.2, 7.1a. And 7.1 has 7.1a and 7.1aa, 7.1b, 7.1c. So firstly, we can start going through section 7.1. Under section 7.1, we'll start with 7.1a, where it says so when I said the transaction, so what are all the kind of transaction that can happen, which can be termed as supply? So read with me. Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or service or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. So here, what are all the important terms to be noted here? Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or service of both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. These are all the transactions they are trying to specify. This is an inclusive list because they have used the word includes all forms of supply. Sale. Sale, everyone can easily understand. For example, I am trying to go and buy a iPhone over the counter. The iPhone, the Apple is trying to sell me the iPhone, which is sale, which is easily understandable. And transfer. For example, if I am selling my land to Mr. B, so that transaction can be called as transfer. Barter. For example, I am agreeing to sell a phone, and in return, I am trying to get an iPad with small amount of money exchange. So that can be said as barter. Exchange. For example, I'm going to Purvika. I'm giving my old phone and getting the new phone exchanged. That license. For example, I'm going and buying a Tally license. It's a license transaction. And rental. For example, I'm living in house or commercial property which I'm taking for rent. Lease. Similarly, lease. And disposal. For example, I'm selling off my iPhone. Just for example, I'm selling in Cashify. So these are all the examples for each kind of transaction which are mentioned here. So these transactions made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. So only these highlighted words are important. So supply includes all forms of supply of goods or service or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in course of furtherance of business. So these three we have for a consideration. So for buying iPhone, I am paying an amount, which is consideration. By a person is me in the course of furtherance of business. So what is in the course of furtherance of business? So selling iPhone is the business of Apple. So in the course of business, it is trying to sell iPhone to me. So all these ticks are made, so this can be treated as supply. So when this transaction becomes supplies, then GST is leviable. So that's what our charging section says. So CGST levied on supply of goods or service or both. So understood, right? So in general, when there is a transaction which is made for consideration by a person in course of furtherance of business, it can be termed as supply. This is what the single liner which section 7.1a tries to tell us. So next comes section 7.1aa of CGST Act, where it tries to see the activities or transaction by a person other than an individual to its member or vice versa for a consideration shall be treated as supply. So this section mainly came into force for the transaction which are in nature of, for example, I'm living in an apartment, and there are 10 units, 10 houses are there in my apartment. So these 10 people form a committee, have a club. They'll be collecting the maintenance every month. For example, uh, for the securities, maintenance, etc., they collect, for example, 1,000 rupees from each of the person, and there is a security guy whose salary is 10,000. So what happens, this club this club will collect 1,000 from all the 10 people and then pay the salary to securities, etc. And for example, I myself living in an apartment and I am doing services of security or similar. For example, I'm just taking an example of security. So it is like I'm giving 1,000 and I'm getting 10,000. I'm giving 1,000 maintenance every month and getting a security salary of 10,000. So here I'm a member of this club, as well as I'm getting paying and getting. So other than an individual, you can name it as club. To its member, I am a member of the club. For a consideration shall be treated as supply. Why this section came? Because there are rulings where it says a person cannot sell a particular goods or service to the same person. So here the member of club and the member are seen as same in many court rulings. So to avoid those complications, for example, if I am doing security services for consideration, it should be treated as supply and it should be within GST scope and it should not escape from GST scope. That's why this section 7.1aa was brought in. And moving on to the next section, which is section 7.1b. So what did we study in section 7.1a? Just three primary conditions to be satisfied: that a transaction should be made for a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. But this 7.1b will be a exception to section 7.1a, whereas it says importation of service for a consideration whether or not it's in course of furtherance of business shall be treated as supply. So in this case, for example, I am importing a service from USA for consideration whether or not it is for a course of furtherance of business. For example, my own house, I'm trying to make a interior. So I'm hiring a interior person from USA. So it is not in course of furtherance of my business. It's a personal activity which I'm doing. But still, this should be treated as supply as per section 7.1b. Moving on to section 7.1b, which says supply, which should be treated as supply even if it is made without consideration. Three primary rule: consideration should be there by a person in course of furtherance of business. An exception to in course of furtherance of business is section 7.1b. An exception to for a consideration is section 7.1b. So section 7.1b says, read with schedule 1, says activities, lists down the activities which are treated needs to be treated as supply even though if it is made without any consideration. First one, permanent transfer or disposal of business asset where input tax credit has been availed. So what does it try to say? For example, there are stock lying in my business and I am trying to sell off my business. For example, the inventory is what I have. For example, I'm having a t-shirt shop, and these t-shirts will be lying as a stock when I'm trying to sell my business. So these are all what? Business asset. Inventory is asset, right? Inventory is an asset for the business. When I bought inventory, I would have paid input tax credit, right? For example, for the t-shirt what is lying in my inventory, if income input tax credit is taken and I am trying to sell this without consideration, I'm trying to give the business to some other person free of cost. Still, even though it is free of cost, I'm not getting any consideration. This should be treated as supply. And the next one, second one, supply of goods or service or both between related person or distinct person. Who is related person and who is a distinct person? It should be the question for you guys which should arise, right? So below I have given the definition, distinct person. So GST GST has a PAN based registration. For example, I have a PAN today and I'm trying to open a proprietorship firm. So the business will have the GST number based on my PAN number. Any company, if they want to try to register under GST, the company's PAN will be the base for getting GST registration. Similarly, where a person who obtained more than one registration, whether in one state or union territory or more than in one state or union territory, in respect of such registration shall be treated as distinct person. For example, I have A Limited which has a branch B Limited. So A Limited is in Tamil Nadu and B Limited is in Karnataka. Since there are two states, it has branch in another state, it has to make a separate registration in Karnataka, right? So these two have two different GST registration, and 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 the entity in Tamil Nadu will be, for example, A Limited Tamil Nadu and B Limited Karnataka. So these two B, which is a branch of A Limited. So I can say instead I can say A Limited branch 1 in TN, branch 2 in Karnataka. Will these two will have different GST registration and therefore these two will be a distinct person. For example, branch 2 is also in Tamil Nadu. Still, these two will be a distinct person. This is what it tries to say. And for example, so first one covers what I said, separate registration, same or different state, it will be a distinct person. Same PAN, one entity is registered and another may be registered or unregistered. It can be called as establishment of distinct person. For example, A Limited has a branch 1 TN which is registered and branch 2 unregistered. These two entities will be establishment of distinct person. This one. Understood? And what are related persons? We have a self-explanatory list. Anyway, I'll just go through fast. Who are related person? If a person or officer or director of one another's business. So A Limited is there. So Mr. X is a director. So these two are related person. So second point, such person are legally recognized partners in business. So Mr. X and Mr. Y form a firm XY. So these two are related person. Third, such person are employer-employee relationship. A Limited is there, Mr. X working as employee, and this case A Limited and Mr. X are related person. Fourth one, a third person directly or indirectly controls, owns or holds 25% or more of the voting shares of both person. For example, a person directly and indirectly holds 25% or more of the share of the company. These two will become a related person. One person directly or indirectly controls the other person. And sixth, a third person directly or indirectly controls both the person. A third person directly or indirectly controlling these two persons will become related person. Such person jointly control directly or indirectly a third person. These two person controls the third person. So these two will become a related person. Such person are member of the same family members. Ninth one person is the sole agent, sole distributor, or sole concessionaire of the other. And where family definition is given here. Family means spouse, children, parent, grandparent, brothers, sisters. So these spouse and children, whether or not they are dependent, they are family. But parents, grandparents, brother, sister, only if they are dependent, they can be said as family, and they can be said as related person under GST. So therefore, coming back to our section 7.1b, second point, where it says supply of goods or service or both between related person and distinct person, whether when made in course of furtherance of business, shall be treated as supply even though consideration is not paid. There is a short note here as well. Provided that gifts not exceeding 50,000 in a financial year by an employer to an employee shall not be treated as supply of goods or service or both. For example, employer is giving 50,000 or gifts worth 50,000 or less than 50,000 to employee. This shall not be treated as supply. However, the perquisite or incentive provided by employee as per employment contract is not a gift. So whatever comes within the contract, that contract, employer-employee contract, for example, I'm getting a perquisite of cab dropping from my company. This is a perquisite. Or for example, I'm getting incentive bonus. I'm getting bonus from my employer. These two are not treated as gift. Okay. Anyway, gifts less than 50,000 received from employer shall not be treated as supply. Right. Third point, supply of goods. See, why highlighted is just says goods and not service. Supply of goods by a principal to his agent, where agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal. So agent, when we talk about agent, there are two kind of agent, right? First one, else I'll do a thing. So Mr. Purchaser, Mr. Agent, and Mr. Seller. For example, this Mr. Purchaser wants 10 number of t-shirt, but he don't know from where he could get a person who is selling such kind of t-shirt, what he expects. So he goes to Mr. Agent, asks for a seller who's ready to sell him n number of t-shirt for the quality which he is expecting. So this agent can act in two types. Whether he can tell, see, there is a seller called Mr. Seller, you can directly go and contact with him, but you have to pay commission of 1% to me on the your purchasing price. Or option number 2, Mr. Purchaser, Mr. Agent, Mr. Seller. Now in this case, what Mr. Agent says, okay, let me do one thing, I'll purchase from a seller on your expected quality and then I'll sell it to you, which is Mr. Purchaser. So what happens in this case, the invoice, the Mr. Seller will raise invoice on purchaser and not agent, but in this case Mr. Seller will raise invoice on agent, he'll get the goods and then Mr. Agent will further sell it to purchaser. But here what we have studied here, supply of goods by a principal to his agent, where agent undertakes to supply, agent undertakes to supply such goods, wherein this is the second case where Mr. A is the person to which seller raises invoice, right? This one scenario only is covered here. This kind of agent only is covered here, where the invoice is raised in agent. If in this background if you study, you can easily understand. Supply of goods by a principal to his agent, where agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal. In such case, even though the consideration is not there, then it should be treated as supply. Similarly, a reverse case, agent to principal. For example, Mr. Seller tries to sell something and he reaches to agent, right? He reaches to agent and he routes a purchaser. So this reverse transaction is covered in the second point, right? By an agent to his supply of goods by an agent to his principal, where agent undertakes to receive such goods on behalf of the principal. Therefore, agent and principal are jointly and severally liable to GST in this case, right? Fourth point, importation of services by a person from related person or from any of his other establishment outside India in course of furtherance of before that we'll cover this note. So as I said, if the invoice, the transaction between principal and agent, where the invoice is raised in the name of principal, then it's not an agent and it's not covered under schedule 1. Where the invoice is in name of agent, then it is an agent in terms of schedule 1, in short, right? Fourth point, importation of services by a person from a related person or from any of his other establishment outside India in course of furtherance of business, right? So importation of services from a related person or from of his other establishment outside India in course of furtherance of business, whether or not undertaken with consideration, can be treated as supply. For example, I am importing a service for my business. I am getting service of my brother who is interior sitting in USA. From him I am getting a service, okay, but since he's brother, I won't pay him anything. GST says no, GST needs to be levied in this transaction. right? So with this, we have completed the first part of the chapter, section 7.1.